Andrew, Judy, their girl, and their 23-year-old child, James Bennett. James was a somewhat exceptional individual. He was just 23 at that point, and was known as the Bennett's child and a serious individual from the Australian safeguard power. James had subscribed to the respectable quest for shielding his country, diving carelessly into the thorough preparation and discipline that characterizes the Imperial Australian Naval Force. When he went with the choice to enroll, he needed to remain in the military for quite a while in the event that he had a decent harmony between the tactical life and his interests, which was generally exploring. He was only one of those individuals that brought a ton of good energy, and it felt far better to associate with him, and he helped many individuals. Yet he was in the Naval Force for around 5 years, and in 2008, he found another calling, something somewhat more risky, yet he felt that it was truly significant in this new place that he was on board the HMAS Norman, a minesweeper of high respect based out of Sydney. A psyche tracker is a maritime vessel that looks for and distinguishes and obliterates individual maritime mines. This was no joking matter. The minesweeper's unmistakable brain regions overall. Without earlier discovery of brains, this occupation was serious on the grounds that they were going into regions loaded up with mines. This was an unsafe work. Yet you, likewise, must be very insightful. So it was ideally suited. For James, this new pursuit brought difficulties for him. Yet James had the option to defeat them. Furthermore, his capacity to commit himself to considering and more deeply studying his specialty permitted him to succeed, and it didn't take long for him to turn into an exceptionally regarded maritime official. One of James' most loved activities was to go setting up camp and to invest however much energy in nature as could be expected. When he was on leave from the tactical, he would get along with his companions and go on various undertakings together. One of the spots that he caught wind of yet had never been to before was known as the Binda Stones. It was settled about 4 miles from Babinda, Australia, and is known as a famously risky spot. It is famous, yet there's science all over, and railings to keep individuals out of the water. This spot conceals something beyond serene waters. When you arrive, you find a collective stopping region and a delightful cookout spot. There's asphalted pathways, and the most unfavorably named place in the Grand Save is called Fiend's Pool Walk. It wanders downstream along the Babinda stream. When you stroll down the way, you'll experience different perception focuses, giving perspectives on the rock developments, the large stones, and the peaceful pools. However, this spot is a tricky jungle gym encompassing the region. In the pools is a lavish rainforest, which is totally gorgeous. It's like you move to an alternate planet that is not normal for anything you've at any point seen before. A security rail encompasses Villain's Pool Post, a perspective with the disrupting past signs around the stage, shout a desperate admonition. Basically, all that here advises you to remain away. The preventative notification feature, the grave risk prowling underneath the well-being rail, and the limited segment of river where many resides have unfortunately been snuffed out decisively. Positioned, the admonition signs are almost impossible to miss. They essentially gaze at each guest in the face, a reverberation of these solemn warnings. When you truly get into the entry to Satan's post-walk, maybe the brook truly murmurs, proceed cautiously. Envision yourself being there. This spot is cautioning, gives generally up, is very gorgeous. You don't actually have the foggiest idea what you're doing, and you've heard a great deal about this spot. Do you stay or do you leave? There's 2 things that set the town of Babinda separated right off the bat. Its name, the Benda itself, means mountain. Thinking of it as supported between Queensland's twin titans, Mount Bartle Frere and Mount Bellin didn't happen. Furthermore, it holds a record. However, Benda is Australia's rainiest town, yearly doused with around 160 inches or a dumbfounding 13 feet of precipitation. It's basically pouring constantly here. Yet it is a rain forest, so that checks out, and there's likewise an endless measure of cascades and underground entries that are overwhelming to investigate to travelers. However, the coolest spot out of this entire region is the Babinda Stones. It's what everybody comes to see. The town is an old legend. encompassing it that a many individuals trust in the legend, murmurs for illegal love of the grievous destruction of two youthful sweethearts before the Western impact. The Yetini clan flourished here. The clan leader Warenu was Beth, roan to an energetic Ulana, yet she had different plans and disappeared one. Pivotal evening eloping with Daga, an ancestral champion maddened. Warren New released his men on the couple. The sweethearts dove into the seething waters as Warnu's men surrounded them from the Papinda stream's corner. Daiga, lost to the profundities, never arose. He suffocated down there, understanding her darling's destiny. Bulana misery, reverberations across the valley, breaking stones and mixing the waters into a vicious craze. She excessively vanished in the midst of the disturbance following this misfortune. The Sasquatch, without a doubt, clan individuals started bafflingly passing on. Close to the water, once the bold heroes capitulated to fear, chased by dreams of Ulana hauling them into the profundities, while the legend has blurred, the fatalities occur throughout the last century. These apparently quiet waters have gulped 20 resides. Some murmur of the revile, an extraordinary maneuver, convincing young fellows into the deceptive waters. They discuss Ulana's soul-tricking casualties to their watery graves. To this end, local people call this put Satan's Pool. On June 10, 1933, the pool guaranteed its previously reported casualty. A neighborhood man was suffocated into the whirlpool up Abenda Cascade's base. His body was rarely recuperated, and it was guessed he was caught in the underground maze of passages inside the river. The nearby paper would make reference to Babinda again in 1940. This time, it was the demise of John Dominic English James, and his companions didn't know about the passings or the historical backdrop of this spot. Before they went there, the social event happened in the late evening of November 30th, 2008. James was with his companions, Adam Farley, John Tawala, and Soy Twala. James went without anyone else, and his different companions took their vehicle, yet they generally wound up at the stones around a similar time. It was somewhat of a hinting that James had shown up freely. The experience began basically like whatever other experience that James happened with his companions. They went for a walk down the stream from the vehicle leave and the cookout region, and afterward they chose to head down. Satan's Pool stroll, there is a winding track that drove them. To Satan's Pool, it was asphalted. However, there was railings on the two sides. The rainforest was surrounding them. They could hear the water thundering, and it was additionally really sticky at the time. John was before the gathering, and he was the one that was the most mindful and saved. So, when he saw the admonition sign that said, "Don't go down into the water," he viewed that extremely in a serious way and went to his companions and told them, including James, "Hello, folks, we're certainly not going into the water cool. We're here and we're going to have a great time. However, we will do nothing risky on the grounds that look what's around us. We ought to simply be protected." James and his companions at ideology. Definitely, that is smart. We ought to do what we will truly do. Have a great time, and afterward we'll return home. And no issue, except for not long after, they discussed that, among themselves, they saw that there is a few children hopping into the water. On the contrary side of the brook, there were no grown-ups around there. They were without help from anyone else going into the water and getting out fine, and there was no issues, and they were having loads of tomfoolery. And this sort of made James and his companions think hello in the event that they're doing this. Perhaps we ought to, too. The thing those children were doing was really hazardous. They were bouncing from one stone to another. The pool of water underneath them was truly quiet. So it appeared as though all was great. John was profoundly disturbed that the children were doing this. He thought it was crazy that they had no grown-up management, and that's what he knew. Whether they sneaked off that stone and went into the water, they would be in a critical circumstance, in a flash. And afterward, there was a couple of hikers that made an appearance to the area, and they were watching the children too. It was somewhat strange on the grounds that it appeared as though they were preparing to go down into the water close to the children. Yet clearly they weren't with the children. They were doing whatever they might feel like doing. So I wasn't actually talking that much to the gathering, and they saw that he was glancing near, and it was clear he was thinking about going under the rail and into the water without showing any foolish dismissal, for risk nearby with these children hopping around. So I chose to go under the rail when he did that. He motioned for everyone, "Hello. We should simply go down to the water and see what's happening. Just to be clear, you shouldn't go down here at all." It was totally shut off, and name it as the taboo zone. Then they thought about the chance of swimming in spite of the alerts at long last. John had enough of this, and he'd needed to leave, and proposed a more secure elective. He needed to return to the outing region, where they originally came in, and that is where you're permitted to swim. So he furrowed his case with James and his different companions, what John was talking about, checked out, so they were going on, and as they were advancing out, they saw something up the stream that grabbed their eye, and they needed to investigate. What they saw was an enormous stone that projected from the rock, and it was a quiet region that seemed as though it would have been acceptable as far as swimming. They didn't have a clue about that. Despite the fact that it appeared to be serene on a superficial level, this was a very risky spot in the brook, and local people who realized this region alluded to as the clothes washer after the occurrence. Adam later imparted his underlying feelings to the police, expressing that the spot had no perilous energies, and the gathering collectively chose to swim there due to the image as seen when they got up there. They at first roosted themselves on an enormous stone, and afterward they took out a few grown-up drinks and began participating in that. Anyway, the peacefulness of the climate was on the cliff of breaking into 1,000 pieces. James and John chose to go into the water. They were about to go in genuine speedy, and afterward return right out. Adam, watching his companions investigate, felt the powerful pull of brotherhood. He chose to go in too, and he picked a close-by spot in the water where there was to a greater extent a delicate surge from the bigger, more quiet pool that flowed into the stirring mass of water of the clothes washer, which is where they were on top of the stones only prior. There he sat on a stone, and he put his feet simply hanging over the water, feeling the cool beads of the sprinkling ebb and flow against his skin. James saw Adam and chose to swim down to him in the stream and across the pools out of nowhere. As he was swimming down, the water began to move him quicker than he could swim. He was beginning to let completely go. Then he dove into the clothes washer. His body vanished underneath the water's surface, and his solid strokes that worked before in the business areas were futile now. The water had total command over him, and he could not do anything. Adam, who is going to hop into the water to join James, noticed what was occurring, and he went crazy. Right now, James was shouting and was totally frenzied on the grounds that he realized that he expected to escape the water. He was being pulled in reverse towards the misleading white water at the downstream finish of the pool. That was the most terrible region that he could be in, so he would have rather not gone down there. Adam's heart was hammering out of his chest as he watched James attempt to grip onto an overhanging branch that was stood out into the water. This was possibly his main lifesaver that was inside his arrive, and then the branch snapped, and there was an uproarious reverberation heard around the crevasse as he broke the branch, liberated from its roost, and James just kept on going down the brook. Adam realized that he needed to follow through with something, so he got a move on, ran around the pool's edge, moving towards James' last area. It is basically impossible to see James, assuming he was under the water or behind a stone where he was in the event that he was maneuvered into the maze, and afterward James sprung up. Yet it was only one of his arms and his head. His outstretched fingers were scarcely penetrating the surface in a frantic heart, delivering request for help, gathering all of boldness he had. Adam moved as near the water's edge as he could oversee, expanding his leg towards his companion in a frantic desire to perhaps have James snatch it and haul him out anyway. No sooner had he done as such than James' battle stopped suddenly after two last fearless endeavors to battle against the whirlpool's grasp. He vanished underneath the surface, gulped down by the clothes washer. James' frantic cry before he got sucked under broken. the peacefulness existing apart from everything else, as yet attempting to help his companion Adam, found a 6-foot branch and tossed it into the pool, out of frenzy and dread, to attempt to help James, his caution filled in, as a shaking reminder, until the end of their gathering and different guests, who were willfully ignorant of the unfurling calamity, they started a hysterical quest. For James and the encompassing pools, their already recreation investigation turned into a critical salvage mission, without losing a second. They reached crisis administrations. John and Soy, their countenances pale and their hearts beating, rushed back to the cookout region, entrusted with a dreary obligation of directing the responders back to the location of their companions' frightening vanishing at roughly 3 p.m. A chilling call punctured the commonplace daily practice, if the Babinda Police Headquarters weighty with the need to get going. The guest's voice handed off the disaster unfurling at the stones. It was their very own crisis. One was absent in the slippery waters. Quickly the officials got a move on, preparing superseding their feeling of adrenaline flowing through their veins upon their landing in the scene. An alarm-filled chorale reverberated through the lush region, reporting their appearance. Following firmly were the EMTs, their countenances set in horrid assurance. They continued down to the Warren-strolling track, their boots crunching on the rock towards the main review stage, the war room for this critical salvage mission. Adam, his voice dry from yelling, told the miserable grouping of occasions to the police. His hands shook somewhat as he motioned toward the threatening clothes washer. A few nervousness-reddened minutes had ticked by since the last locating of James. The air was thick with strain as everybody on the site proceeded with their frantic hunt, as the weightiness of the circumstance sank in the officials. Quickly mentioned the Quick Water Salvage Group from the Queensland Fire and Salvage Administration. However, Binda's State Crisis Administration was likewise reached, and their skill was considered basic for a hunt of this nature. After getting the trouble signal, every unit answered quickly and was immediately conveyed to help with the demanding endeavors to find James. In spite of their steady endeavors, the pursuit of the rapids was seriously thwarted by the unforgiving circumstances defying them. This was risky territory, and the waters, persevering stirs, put forth their attempts want to fight an impressive, undetectable power. James's 2 dear companions, Adam and John, gave a pivotal declaration to the police, portraying James' perspective. Before his dive into the clothes washer, as per their record, James showed no indications of inebriation. While it was really the case that he had humored, it was an immaterial sum roughly identical to short of what one serving in the strained days that followed the salvage group vigorously brushed the banks of Babinda River. Their countenances bore the stress of delayed hours and the tragic undertaking of recuperation as opposed to a salvage. It was a quiet declaration to their resolute expectation that the sad truth of their main goal could be a body recuperation on the morning of Tuesday, December 2nd. Similarly, as the sun peaked its pale light over the turbulent stream, the officials engaged with the pursuit happened upon a lamentable sight bouncing against a rough edge in a more profound pool. Unfavorably known as Satan's Pool, had all the earmarks of being a dormant body. It was around 150 meters downstream. From where James had been most recently seen, the environment was heavier with serious acknowledgement as police jumpers entered the pool, their target to clear and to get the body hours ticked by, and at around 4 p.m., the recovery group accomplished their sad objective. James's body was carefully separated from the tireless grasp of the brook as the story unfurled the shrewd coroner. Dr. Bodarelli reached a dismal resolution in his report, given the conditions and the post-mortem examination results. The reason for James' demise was steady with the unforgiving, persistent nature of suffocating. And so that is all I have for you today, and I value you watching until the end, assuming you found this story both captivating and sad.